close your eyes and imagine yourself in another time, a time when the mind was a mystery, when the walls of asylums held secrets, and when the line between treatment and torment was often blurred. Tonight we journey back to the 19th century, to the dimly lit halls of Victorian insane asylums, where patients lived under the weight of misunderstood science and rigid routines. But this isn't a story of horror, it's a story of history, of lives quietly endured, of strange medical relics buried in time, and of the stark contrasts between those who suffered and those who sought solace in silk-lined retreats. So settle in, let your thoughts drift, and allow yourself to step into the past. Picture this, a cold morning in 1873. The air inside the asylum is thick with the scent of damp stone and carbolic soap. Somewhere down the hall, a patient hums tunelessly, their voice echoing off the high ceilings. The attendants move methodically, their shoes clicking against the tile. This is the daily rhythm of life inside a Victorian asylum, a place where order was prized above all else, where the unpredictable human mind was subjected to routines as rigid as iron bars. If you were a patient here, your day began early. At dawn you might be roused from a thin mattress, your limbs stiff from the chill. Breakfast was often a bland porridge, eaten under watchful eyes. Then came the treatments, some strange, some brutal, all believed to be for your own good. One of the most common was the ice bath. Imagine being lowered into a tub of frigid water, your body seized by the shock of cold. Doctors believed this would shock the mind back into reason. For some, it only brought numbness. Restraints were another constant. Leather straps, straitjackets, even chains in the worst cases. The goal was control, to keep the unpredictable body still, as if stillness could quiet the mind. And then there was the silence. Many asylums enforced strict rules of quiet, believing noise to be a symptom of madness. Patients learned to speak in whispers, if at all. The air was thick with unspoken words. Yet, amid all this, life persisted. Patients found small comforts, a shared glance, a stolen moment of sunlight in the courtyard. Some worked in the asylum's laundry or gardens, their hands busy, their minds momentarily distracted. But always the routines returned. The baths, the restraints, the silence. A cycle as unyielding as the walls around them. But not all stories of the asylum were the same. Some who entered these halls did so not as patients, but as observers, hidden witnesses to a system few understood. One such woman would change everything. In the year 1887, a young woman named Nellie Bly walked the streets of New York City, her mind set on an impossible task. She was a journalist, one of the few women in her field, and she had been given a dangerous assignment to feign madness, get herself committed to the infamous Blackwell's Island Insane Asylum, and report back on what she found. Few believed she could do it. Even fewer could have imagined what she would uncover. To prepare, Nellie practiced her act. She stopped sleeping, let her appearance grow wild, and wandered the streets with a vacant stare. Soon she was picked up by the authorities and declared insane. Within days, she found herself on a boat to Blackwell's Island, where the asylum loomed like a fortress over the East River. The doors closed behind her, and her real work began. What Nellie Bly discovered inside was a world of neglect. The food was often spoiled. Rancid butter, stale bread, thin gruel with floating gristle. The water was ice cold, the baths communal and humiliating. Patients, some perfectly sane, were trapped there by a system that did not listen. The nurses were overworked, the doctors indifferent. And the treatments? Endless hours of sitting in silence, broken only by the occasional scream or whimper from a forgotten soul down the hall. But Nellie was different. She took notes, Mentally, carefully, remembering every detail, she spoke to the other women, hearing their stories. Some had been committed for mere hysteria or melancholy. Others were immigrants who couldn't defend themselves in English. A few, like her, were likely sane, but had no one to vouch for them. The asylum was not a place of healing. It was a place of waiting, of fading. After 10 days, Nellie was finally released. Her newspaper had pulled strings to secure her freedom. Her resulting articles shocked the nation. She described the cold, the hunger, the despair. She named names. And because of her, reforms began. Investigations were launched, budgets increased. Slowly, so slowly, things began to change. Nellie Bly's story is a ghost that lingers over the history of mental health, a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is not to escape the darkness, but to walk into it willingly and bring back the truth. Yet, even as Nellie's words forced society to confront its failures, other doctors were still searching for answers, some in the most unsettling of places. Deep in the basements of asylums, forgotten machines waited, their purpose long abandoned. In the early 20th century, as Nellie Bly's revelations still echoed through reform movements, a new theory took hold in some medical circles. Doctors had begun to believe that mental illness was not a disorder of the mind, but of the body, specifically of infection. And one man took this idea further than anyone else. Dr. Henry Cotton, superintendent of the New Jersey State Hospital at Trenton, was convinced that insanity was caused by hidden infections, rotting teeth, inflamed tonsils, even diseased organs, and so he began removing them, one by one. Imagine, if you will, a patient strapped to a table. The ether has taken hold, but not enough to erase the sensation entirely. The surgeon's tools gleam under the gaslight. A tooth is wrenched free, then another, then the tonsils. If the madness persists, perhaps the stomach must be opened, the colon resected. The theory was simple: cut out the infection and the mind will heal itself. The results, of course, were catastrophic. Patients died from complications. Others were left permanently disabled. Some, tragically, were no better mentally, only quieter, broken by pain and loss. Yet for years Dr. Cotton's methods were praised. His asylum became a place of pilgrimage for doctors eager to learn his techniques. The medical journals wrote of his successes, not his failures. But time has a way of burying things. Today, Dr. Cotton's legacy survives only in yellowed case files and the occasional discovery of old surgical instruments tucked away in hospital basements. Rusted forceps, strange curved blades, tools that once promised miracles, now relics of a forgotten horror. Yet, even as some asylums descended into darkness, others took a different path, one of sunlight, music, and the illusion of peace. For the wealthy, madness was not a sentence, it was a retreat. Now let us step away from the cold asylum halls and into the dappled sunlight of a Parisian garden. The year is 1895. A woman in a lace-trimmed dressing gown reclines on a wrought iron bench, idly plucking petals from a rose as a uniformed attendant approaches with a silver tray. On it rests a crystal glass of red wine, prescribed, of course, for her nervous condition. This is not Blackwell's Island. This is Passy, where Europe's wealthy elite came to rest their troubled minds in the most comfortable captivity money could buy. Here, patients, or rather guests, enjoyed private suites with silk drapes and fresh flowers daily. Their treatment might include hydrotherapy and marble baths, strolls through manicured hedgerows, or even experimental electrotherapy sessions administered with gold-plated devices. The food was prepared by chefs, the wine cellar carefully stocked. Some establishments even employed musicians to play soothing sonatas during the evening digestif. The most famous of these retreats, the Maison de Santé du Docteur Blanche, counted among its patients artists like composer Charles Gounod and the tormented poet Gérard de Nerval. Their madness was reframed as artistic temperament, their treatment consisting largely of conversation, laudanum, and being kept away from anything that might cause distress, like creditors or heartbroken lovers. Yet, even in this gilded cage, shadows lingered. The same doctors who prescribed musical therapy and mountain air also experimented with hypnosis and early psychoactive drugs. Wealth didn't cure madness, it merely draped it in velvet. And when the wine wore off and the musicians packed away their instruments, the same fears whispered through these corridors as in any asylum. The difference was, here one could afford to whisper back in comfort, while the poor and forgotten languished in asylums of restraint and silence. Europe's aristocracy had another option entirely. For them, madness was not a stain to be scrubbed away in cold hospital wards. It was a delicate affliction to be treated like a fading complexion or a nervous stomach. And so they retreated, not to asylums, but to sanatoriums. Imagine, if you will, a chateau on the outskirts of Paris. High windows flood the rooms with honeyed light. The air smells of beeswax polish and the faintest trace of opium. Here, a baroness suffering from hysteria might spend her mornings wrapped in Turkish linens, sipping mineral water from Baden-Baden. In the afternoons, a doctor, never a mere attendant, but a man with a gold-tipped cane, would listen to her troubles with infinite patience before suggesting a course of magnetic therapy or perhaps a journey to the Swiss Alps for a change of air. These establishments were not hospitals, they were havens. The Maison de Santé d'Ivry, for instance, boasted private gardens where patients could paint on plein air, their melancholia reframed as artistic sensitivity. The famous Salpêtrière in Paris, though also a public hospital, had separate pavilions for wealthy women, where they received le traitement moral, a regimen of music, light labour, and gentle persuasion meant to coax the mind back into proper behaviour. But the most striking contrast lay in the treatments themselves. Where pauper asylums relied on ice baths and confinement, the elite were prescribed luxury. Hydrotherapy, yes, but in sunlit marble baths scented with lavender. Rest cures, but in four-poster beds with goose-down pillows. Even electrotherapy, a terrifying prospect in public asylums, became almost fashionable when administered with gilded machines and promises of rejuvenation. Yet, for all their comforts, these retreats were still cages. The poet Charles Baudelaire, confined in one such maison de santé, wrote of the elegant despair that clung to its residents. The composer Robert Schumann, in his final years at a private clinic in Endenich, was allowed wine, visitors, and a piano, yet still died broken by delusions no silk curtain could soften. Perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of all. Money could buy comfort, but not a cure. It could mask suffering in velvet, but not erase it. And when the wine was drunk and the gardens walked, the mind still whispered its troubles, only now in a room with a better view. And so we leave these gilded halls behind, their chandeliers still burning bright in memory. For in the end, whether in stone asylum or silk-draped salon, the mind remained a mystery, and every treatment, no matter how gentle, was only ever a guess in the dark. Now, step into St. Giles Rookery, London's most infamous slum. The year is 1842, and the air is thick with the reek of rotting meat, unwashed bodies, and human waste. The streets are not paved with cobblestones, but with a black ooze, a mix of mud, sewage, and the blood of slaughtered livestock from the nearby market. You enter a house. The door hangs crooked on its hinges, and the floorboards sag like a drunkard's knees. Inside, 30 souls are packed into a single room. No beds, just rotting straw pallets crawling with lice. A single candle gutters in the corner, its light swallowed by the darkness. A baby wails, not from hunger, but because its legs are boiled red with rat bites. An old man coughs, his lungs drowning in tuberculosis. Somewhere a couple argues in thieves' cant slang, their words slurred by gin. Outside, a prostitute laughs too loudly, her teeth black from syphilis, and beneath it all the drip, drip, drip of water seeping through the ceiling. The walls weep black mould, and the rafters creak under the weight of 3 more families living above. You take a step, and your foot sinks into something soft. A dead rat, number human filth. There is no toilet, only a cesspit in the cellar, overflowing into the water supply. In the corner a penny hang, a rope strung across the room where men sleep slumped over, paying a penny to avoid lying in the muck. If the rope breaks, they wake in the filth. A small hand tugs your sleeve. A girl, maybe 6, her face smudged with soot. She holds out a half-eaten potato peel. "A farthing, sir." She's a pure finder, collecting dog feces to sell to tanneries, used in leather making. Her brother, a climbing boy, sleeps curled in the fireplace. His elbows are raw from scrubbing chimneys. Last week, a boy just like him got stuck and suffocated in the flue. They left his body there. It was cheaper than dismantling the brickwork. But humans adapt. Always. A thieves' kitchen operates in the back room, stolen goods traded for gin. A sly landlord charges 5 shillings a week for this hellhole, half a labourer's wages. And in the shadows, a bone grubber picks through trash for scraps to sell as fertiliser. Dawn cracks through the broken windows. The room stirs. A woman vomits bile, another night of drinking blue ruin, gin laced with sulphuric acid. A man checks his pockets, praying his last penny wasn't stolen. And the little girl? She's already gone. Back to the streets, to the never-ending hunt for scraps. Your eyes snap open, not because the sun has risen, the sky outside your damp cellar room is still black as coal tar, but because the mill bell is clanging. 4 in the morning. You have 12 minutes to pull on your wooden clogs, choke down a mouthful of stale bread and run through the icy streets to the textile factory. If you're late, the foreman will lock the gates, and if you're locked out, you don't eat tonight. The factory looms ahead, its smokestacks belching poison into the dawn. Inside, the air is thick with cotton dust, the deafening clatter of looms drowning all thought. You're 9 years old, and your job is to be a scavenger, crawling under the whirling machinery to pick up fallen cotton. One slip, and the gears will peel the flesh from your bones like an orange. Last week it happened to Mary Wilkins. She was 8. The machine tore off her arm before anyone could stop it. They carried her out, screaming, wrapped in a blood-soaked apron. The foreman shrugged. "Fetch another girl from the workhouse. Every job here is measured in blood and pennies." The pieces, children, dart between machines, tying broken threads with fingers raw and bleeding from the work. They earn 3 shillings a week. The spinners, women, pace for 15 hours a day beside boiling vats of yarn, their lungs clogged with steam. They earn 7 shillings. The beaters, men, haul 100-pound sacks of raw cotton, their backs bent like old trees. They earn 12 shillings if they survive the year. No breaks, no gloves, no windows. The factory owner lives in a mansion upriver where the air is clean. He calls this progress. You call it hell. Not all children work in mills. Some are sold to master sweeps, men who buy orphans for a few coins and send them up chimneys no wider than a dinner plate. Close your eyes. Imagine your elbows scraped to the bone from wriggling upward, your lungs full of soot, coughing up black phlegm, the terror of getting stuck, like little Thomas Clark, who suffocated in a flue in 1840. They had to break the bricks to get his body out. The sweeps sing to themselves as they climb, a shaky little tune to keep the fear at bay. Brush, 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 up we go. If you're lucky enough to avoid factories, you might work the London docks. At dawn, 500 men fight for 20 jobs. The foreman points, you, and the rest trudge home to starving families. The chosen ones haul crates of sugar, tea, or worse, guano, bird shit, from South America, so toxic it blisters your skin, jute fibres that slice your hands like paper cuts, then fester in the damp. At day's end, you're paid 5 pence, enough for a loaf of bread and a sip of gin to numb the pain. Too sick to work? The workhouse awaits. A prison for the poor where families are split apart, meals are gruel and silence, and the dead are buried in unmarked pits. You'll break stones for no pay, just to prove you deserve food. The master calls it moral reform. You'll call it slow suicide, and yet some still choose it over the streets, because at least here the rats are fat enough to catch and eat. Now the great smog descends. It begins as a yellowish haze in the morning, innocent as a cat stretching in sunlight. By noon the air turns pea soup green. By nightfall you can taste the soot on your tongue, thick as gravy. This is no ordinary fog. This is London particular. A swirling broth of coal smoke, chemical fumes and rotting river air. You tie a sour vinegar rag over your mouth. It does nothing. The street lamps glow like drowned moons, their light smothered after 3 feet. Somewhere ahead a man coughs, a wet, tearing sound, but you can't see him. The smog has swallowed him whole. Follow the stench. That's how you find the river. The Thames isn't water anymore. It's a black, bubbling gruel of human shit, 200 tons dumped daily, animal carcasses, floating bloated like balloons, industrial waste, arsenic, lead, and the rainbow slime of chemical dyes. In the summer of 1858, the heat cooked it into the Great Stink. Parliament soaked their curtains in chloride of lime to block the smell. The poor, they drank it. Fun fact, the river was so flammable, boys would skip flaming rags across it for sport. Breathe in, go on. That tickle in your throat, that sulfur dioxide from 10 million coal fires. The dizziness, that's carbon monoxide from gasworks. The blood in your handkerchief, that's phossy jaw, your teeth rotting from match factory fumes. Doctors call it London chest, a special disease for chimney sweeps, dead by 25, lungs packed with soot, match girls, skin glowing green from phosphorus, every baby who suckles poison from its mother's milk. In 1873, a fog like this killed 500 people in 3 days. Their lips were blue as ink. You're thirsty, of course you are. The air's sucked the moisture from your lungs. A water cart jingles down the street. Pure Hampstead water, the vendor cries. It's piss warm and swimming with tadpoles, but you pay a halfpenny. What he doesn't tell you, the Hampstead spring dried up years ago. This is Thames water filtered through a rotting horse carcass. That fresh taste is sulfuric acid from the tannery upstream. Too late. You've already drunk it. Listen, carriage wheels. The wealthy are fleeing upwind to Hampstead or Brighton. Their doctors prescribe country air, like it's a medicine. It is. Meanwhile, in the slums, prostitutes smear garlic paste on their faces. They think it wards off plague. Street kids play fog ghost. Vanishing into the murk to steal handkerchiefs, your landlord demands rent, even as black mould blooms on your bedroom walls. Irony, the rich burn even more coal in their country mansions. The smoke just blows back on you. Old Mrs. O'Dowd swears the worst fogs whisper. Last winter she heard 1,000 coughs in unison, the gurgle of the drowning. A child's voice saying, "Mum, I can't see you." She died come spring. Fog sickness, they said. But the neighbours still bolt their doors when the smog rolls in. It's just past dawn in London, sometime in the 1850s. The sky is a heavy shade of grey, and the air hangs thick with coal dust. It hasn't rained, but the streets are wet, always wet somehow. Maybe from the night's chamber pots emptied into the alley, maybe from the factory steam, maybe from something less easy to name. You're small, no more than 7, perhaps 8 years old. Your feet are bare, your ankles blue from the morning chill. There's no coat, just a threadbare shirt too big for your shoulders, and a pair of pants that once belonged to someone else. There's a rip above the knee. No one's going to mend it. You live in a tenement, one of many. Your whole family, 6 of you, shares a single room no larger than a pantry in a fine house. 1 bed, 1 cracked basin, no toilet. The walls sweat when it gets warm, and in the winter the frost creeps in through the cracks like a ghost. You sleep curled beside your younger siblings, half awake from the coughing, half frozen from the cold. This morning, like every morning, you're sent to the factory, or maybe the matchstick shop, or the brickyards, or, worse still, the chimney. The soot clings to your skin before you've even begun work. Your hands, small and nimble, are useful to your employers, though they never call themselves that. You're just the boy or the girl. They pay you a few pennies a week. If you don't come in one day, you'll be replaced the next. There's always another child waiting by the alley, hollow-eyed and hungry. The factory roars like a beast. Inside it smells of oil, rust and sweat. The machines never stop. You're told not to blink, not to slow. Don't let your finger get caught. Last week Thomas lost 3. The overseer hit him for bleeding on the cotton. Nobody's seen him since. Lunchtime is no relief. A crust of bread, maybe. Water, if you're lucky. Sometimes you steal a glance out the soot-stained window. The world outside is no better. Horse carts rattle by, splashing filth on the curb. There's no green, no trees, just chimneys. Always chimneys. If you're a climbing boy, it's even worse. You're small enough to fit up the flues, sent into the heart of narrow brick stacks with nothing but a stiff brush and a cough in your chest. It's black in there. So black you don't know if your eyes are open. You wriggle, scrape, press your back against hot bricks. You hope you don't get stuck. The air burns your lungs. Some boys never come back down. And the worst part, this is normal. To you, this is simply what life is. No books, no toys, no school unless a reformer gets lucky and finds your name on a list. You've heard of rich children, ones with governesses and sweet puddings and boots made of soft leather. But they are as far from your world as the moon is from the Thames. Even at home, it's no better. Your father works when he can, drinks when he can't. Your mother, she tries. But she's tired, always tired, and the baby's been coughing for days now, his breath coming in short, sharp wheezes. You think of the doctor, but doctors cost money, pennies you don't have, so she wraps him in an old shawl and sings to him softly, praying the fever breaks. At night, the room fills with the low rumble of snoring and distant arguments drifting in from the street. Your stomach growls. You shift beneath the thin blanket, listening to the muffled sound of your own breath. Tomorrow will be the same. Another day of soot and sore hands, of cold porridge and cracked fingers. But for now, you lie still. The gaslights flicker through the cracks in the wall. Somewhere beyond the fog, the bells of St. Paul's begin to toll, slow and low. And for just a moment, the city pauses. Let me take you somewhere a little different now. Same city, same time, but this time we're not looking from the bottom. We're looking at the bottom. through the eyes of a man who tried to understand it, Charles Booth. He wasn't born poor, not by any means. Booth came from a prosperous background. His family made their money in shipping and trade. He wore fine coats, owned property, dined in rooms with white linens and silver forks. He could have lived out his days in quiet comfort. But something wouldn't let him look away. He was troubled. Troubled by what he saw each morning on the streets of London. Children barefoot in the frost. Old women selling matches on corners, their fingers stiff with cold. Men, strong men, sleeping in doorways, their faces hidden beneath layers of rag and shame. In 1886, Charles Booth began a project, a strange, massive, slow-moving project. He wanted to measure poverty, not guess it, not estimate it, not wave it away with words like unfortunate. He wanted to map it with ledgers and footsteps and honest eyes. Booth hired a small team of investigators, some clergymen, some social workers, even a few retired police officers. Each was handed a notebook, a pencil, a small section of London, and a question. What is life like here? Street by street they walked, from Whitechapel to Lambeth, from the crooked alleys of Soho to the elegant parks of Kensington. They wrote down everything, who lived where, what they did, what they earned, what their homes smelled like, and then Booth coloured it in, the maps of London poverty. At first glance they looked like something from a schoolroom, neatly drawn streets and blocks, carefully inked labels. But look closer, and the colours told a deeper story. Black for the lowest class, vicious semi-criminal. Dark blue for the very poor who lived hand to mouth. Light blue for the working poor. Purple and pink for the comfortable, the respectable. And finally, red and yellow for the upper classes, the well-off, the wealthy, the untouched. When Booth looked at his map, he saw a city in contradiction, poverty pressed against privilege. A mansion might stand just one alley away from a lodging house packed with 30 coughing tenants. He traced these boundaries with his fingertip, wondering how so many could have so little, so close to those who had so much. But Booth didn't want pity. He didn't write with outrage. He wrote with detail. His reports described the exact price of coal, the length of queues at soup kitchens, the noise levels near a tannery. He didn't shout, he documented. And somehow, that whisper of data said more than a scream ever could. The maps grew in fame. Parliament took notice. So did Queen Victoria. Some people applauded Booth for shining a light on what had been hidden. Others criticised him for putting numbers on things that, they said, couldn't be measured. But Booth kept going. He believed knowledge could lead to empathy. That understanding the system, really understanding it, was the first step toward changing it. He didn't live to see modern welfare programs or universal health care, but his work laid the foundations, quietly. Charles Booth passed away in 1916, old, tired, nearly forgotten by then. His maps sat in drawers and libraries for decades, until someone opened them again and saw the truth still etched in blue and black and red. And if you could step back in time and hold one of those maps in your hands, trace your finger down a narrow street inked in dark blue, you might feel a quiet echo of all those unnamed lives. The little boy with soot on his face, the woman who scrubbed laundry until her hands bled, the match seller, the seamstress, the dock worker, not just forgotten faces, but a part of the city, mapped, recorded, remembered. And tonight, as you rest, perhaps you'll dream not of kings or battles or conquests, but of a man with a pencil and a quiet question. What is life like here? Now, Let's drift a little deeper into the back streets of London, past the main roads and market stalls, past the gaslights and the sound of boot heels on cobblestone. There's a place where people speak in whispers, where the fog feels heavier, and where strange little trades kept people barely, just barely alive. Welcome to the world of rag pickers and the bone men. By day, these men and women were nearly invisible. They walked the streets with bags slung over their shoulders, or old carts with wobbling wheels. Some pushed barrows, others dragged sacks as big as they were. Their eyes were always scanning, always searching, not for food, not for money, but for something more peculiar. Rags, bones, bits of metal, a broken boot, a strip of cloth, a cracked teacup. Anything that could be sold, melted, boiled, reused, or ground into something else. Let's start with the bones. In the 1800s, London's butchers produced an incredible amount of waste. Animal bones littered the alleys behind slaughterhouses and markets. And while most people saw them as garbage, the bone men saw gold. You see, bones could be sold to renderers, boiled into glue, crushed into powder for fertilizer. Some were used for knife handles, others for buttons, and in a time before plastic, bone was valuable. But collecting bones was no gentle trade. The smell was unbearable, the competition fierce. Children were often the first to dart behind carts and grab a fresh femur before someone else got it. Now the rag pickers, they worked by lantern light. They scoured alleys, gutters and garbage heaps for scraps of cloth. A stained apron, a torn bonnet, the lining of an old coat. To you or me, these things would seem worthless. But to a rag picker, they were hope. Cotton and linen rags were sold to paper mills. Wool could be re-dyed and remade into rough cloth. Even greasy fabric, if there was enough of it, could be sold to candle makers or tallow merchants. They worked in silence. Many were widows, some were children, eyes down, shoulders hunched, wading through soot, ash and rot. There were risks too. It wasn't unusual for a rag picker to come across a dead rat, or worse. Sometimes there were sharp blades hidden in the piles, or shattered glass from old gin bottles. Infections were common, so were coughs that never quite went away. And then there were the night soil men, but that's a story for another time. Still, for all its filth, the rag trade had its rhythms. Certain streets were better on Mondays, after the weekend markets. Others yielded more after payday, when drunken toss-outs increased. Some rag pickers knew the names of every family on a street, and what kind of rubbish they were likely to throw out. It was survival. Grimy, grinding survival. They weren't respected. They weren't remembered. But they kept the city running in their own way, recycling what could be salvaged, making use of what others left behind. And once in a while, if a rag picker was very lucky, they might find a coin, or a bit of silver tucked into a pocket no one thought to check, enough for tea, or coal, or bread with a crust. And then, back to the alleys, back to the fog, back to the dark business of staying alive. So tonight, as you lie warm beneath your covers, spare a moment for the forgotten hands that combed the filth by moonlight, not for glory, not for praise, but for the right to breathe one more day. Leave behind the soot-stained alleys. Step out of the fog, the factory smoke, the stench of coal. Let's drift west to Mayfair. The streets here are different, wide, clean, lined with gas lamps and polished doorknobs. The buildings are tall and proper, with little gardens tucked behind iron gates. Carriages line the curb, liveried footmen stand at attention, and inside, behind heavy velvet drapes, something is happening, a dinner party. Let's step inside, just for a moment. It's evening. The sky is dark, But in this house, every chandelier blazes. The hallway smells faintly of roses and beeswax. Your boots click softly on marble floors as you're ushered into the drawing room. Everything is soft. Soft voices, soft fabrics, soft music. You're handed a glass of sherry. A violinist plays in the corner, barely louder than a whisper. The guests are dressed in silk and satin. The women's dresses bloom with lace and ribbon, their hair curled into impossible shapes. The men wear black tailcoats, snowy cravats, gold cufflinks. They speak of the opera, of Parliament, of rumours from Vienna. Their voices are smooth and practised, trained not to shout or interrupt. No one here has soot under their nails. No one here knows what a rag picker is, or if they do, they don't mention it. Eventually the butler announces dinner, and the party flows like water into the dining room. Ah, the dining room, long table, candles flickering in crystal sconces, a centrepiece of orchids and silver bowls. Each place is set with precision, fine china edged with gold, 7 utensils per setting, crystal glasses for every type of wine. You are seated, a nod from the host, and so the feast begins. First, consommé, a delicate broth poured from silver. Then fish, lightly sole, gently poached, served with a pale sauce whose name you don't quite catch. A sorbet to cleanse the palate. Then roast beef, or perhaps duck, carved at the table by a man in gloves. Everything is precise. Everything is timed. No one eats too quickly. No one speaks with a full mouth. And always, always, the staff hover just out of sight, ready to refill a glass or clear a plate. The conversation never stops, but it never gets too loud. It dances like the candlelight around politics, art, scandal. Who wore what at last week's ball? And if anyone mentions the poor, it's with polite discomfort. A clergyman's speech, a new tax, a letter to the Times. But here, in this room, poverty feels as distant as the stars. After the final course, perhaps a pear poached in wine, or a slice of delicate pudding, the ladies retreat to the drawing room. The men stay behind. Brandy is poured, cigars lit, and talk turns darker, rougher, but only slightly. The stock market, the colonies, the price of coal. Eventually the party resumes. Music returns. The piano is played. Perhaps a waltz is attempted, awkwardly, in the parlour, or a game of cards, or a small flirtation over tea and tiny sandwiches. And then, as midnight chimes, the guests begin to depart. Cloaks are draped, gloves slipped on, carriages called, final bows made. The house dims. The candles flicker and die. Servants silently clear the dishes and fold the linen. And the lady of the house. She stands in her empty dining room, alone with the silence. Because even in Mayfair, luxury doesn't stop time, or loneliness. And while the rag pickers dream of a warm fire, the gentlefolk dream of softer things, of dances, of titles, of meaning. But the city, it sleeps just the same, from Whitechapel to Mayfair, from soot to silk. London breathes in twilight, one dream layered over another, far from cities, far from buildings even, back to the wide, open grasslands of the 13th century, the Mongolian steppe. There is no paved road here, no towers, no walls, just a flat, endless stretch of grass and wind, and sky that seems too big to fit in your eyes all at once. The sun is rising low and gold on the horizon. It's cold. The kind of cold that bites before you've even rolled out of your blanket. And you are small, a child, a boy of 10 winters perhaps. Your job? Herd the animals, not some, all, horses, goats, sheep, yaks, maybe. They're your family's wealth, their future, their survival. But they're also your problem. You wake in a yurt, a round tent made of felt and hide, the air inside thick with the smell of milk and smoke. Your mother's already tending the fire. Your older brother is gone, off hunting with your father, so it's up to you. You pull on your thick coat, the sheep wool lining scratchy against your arms, and wrap your sash tight. The wind whips across the grass before you've even taken your first step. Your face stings, your hands are cracked. Your boots are made of leather and hope. The animals have wandered again, always wandering. Your job is to find them, bring them back, make sure no wolves, no rustlers, no rival clans have taken them. And, if they have, there's no one to help you. You carry a stick, not a weapon exactly, more like a suggestion. You whistle low, you click your tongue, you know every cry the goats make, every snort from the ponies. Sometimes you ride, but not for fun. You ride to chase, to gather, to protect. Your body aches. Your cheeks are burned red from the wind. Your nose runs constantly. There's no point in wiping it. You're always cold. Even in summer, there's wind. You carry dried cheese in a pouch, maybe a bit of milk skin, rubbery and sour. It fills your belly, sort of. And there's always the fear of wolves, fear of rival tribes, fear that a horse might bolt and you'll be blamed, fear that tonight when the sun sets, you'll come back with fewer animals than you left with. And that will mean trouble. You're a child, but there is no softness, no toys, no school. You were born into a saddle, they say, but the saddle bruises, and the pony doesn't always listen. At night you return to the camp, your legs are sore, your throat dry. Inside the yurt, the stove gives off warmth and the smell of boiling milk. Your mother hums a song passed down for generations. She hands you a wooden bowl of airag, fermented mare's milk. It's sour, fizzy, but it's warm. You drink, you sit, and the wind rattles the flap of the yurt, like it always does. Outside the stars hang low over the steppe, so clear, so cold, a blanket of forever. You lie beside your little sister, pull the heavy blanket over your shoulders, and you dream of horses that listen, of yurts that never leak, of skies without wind. But in the morning, it all begins again, long before the world feared him, before his name echoed across continents, before he was Khan of Khans. He was just a boy. His name was Temujin, born around the year 1162, somewhere in the high, wind-swept hills of Mongolia. There is no painting of that day, no trumpet or omen, only the story, passed from one voice to another. They say he was born clutching a blood clot in his fist. A sign, some whispered, of a warrior's destiny. Others only frowned and looked away. Temujin was born into a clan called the Borjigin. His father, Yasuge, was a chieftain, not a king, not a slave. Somewhere in between, powerful enough to lead, weak enough to be envied. Temujin spent his early years on horseback, chasing goats, watching the sky, learning how to aim a bow before he could grow a beard. But the sky changed when he was just 9. His father was poisoned by rivals, and everything fell apart. Suddenly the family was cast out, no allies, no horses, no protection. Temujin, his mother, his brothers, they were abandoned on the open steppe, left to starve. They boiled roots, dug for mice, ate whatever moved. He was still a boy, but in his heart, something was already hardening. Time passed. Temujin grew. He was captured once, maybe more, enslaved, shackled, beaten. They tied him with a wooden collar so he couldn't run, but he did. He escaped in the dark, barefoot through frost. He remembered every name, every face. He never forgot. Temujin learned to watch, to wait, to speak plainly, and say very little. He made allies not with nobles, but with the forgotten, the lowborn, the cast-off, the broken men who had nothing but loyalty to give. He rose slowly, one clan at a time, one battle, one oath. He proved himself not by blood, but by trust. He married a girl named Bertha. She was stolen from him. He brought her back, and the stories began, of how he punished betrayal, of how he rewarded courage, of how he tore down the old lines, the ones that said only blue blood could lead. Eventually, he was no longer just Temujin. He became Genghis Khan, not a name, a title, the universal ruler. Under his command, horsemen thundered across Asia like storm clouds. Cities fell, empires cracked. But this is not a tale of conquest. Not yet. This is the story of a boy who lost everything, who crawled through the ashes of his family's shame, who taught himself not just how to survive, but how to command. And even now, hundreds of years later, when the wind whistles across the steppe at night, some say his spirit still rides, silent, relentless, unseen, not as a tyrant, but as a child of the grass, who became something more. Now, let's leave the wind-swept hills for a while. Let the campfires fade behind us. Let the herds drift across the plain, their hooves muffled in the grass. And let us step into the grandest yurt in the world. The great Khan's tent. It is not a palace, but it might as well be. From the outside it looks like any other ger, circular, low, wrapped in felt, but larger, much larger, supported by carved pillars and layered in thick white wool. Inside, a different world. Warmth, soft hides laid over the earth, furs from fox and sable lining the walls, low tables inlaid with bone and gold, and at the centre, Genghis Khan. He is not shouting, not giving commands. He is feasting. You are among his guests. Tonight is not a battle. It is not a raid. It is a celebration for a marriage or a new alliance or the turning of the season. You sit on a cushion near the fire pit, your legs folded beneath you. A servant passes by with a golden ladle. He pours you a bowl of ayrag, fermented mare's milk. It bubbles softly, it's tart, and it warms your chest. Before you, dishes appear. Not plates, not as you know them, but carved bowls, deep and smooth. Inside, steaming mutton, slow-cooked with onions and wild herbs. There is blood sausage, grilled horse meat, and dumplings, soft and delicate, folded with care. There are no forks, only knives. Your hands do the rest. There is music, low and long, the hum of a throat singer. One note held steady while another drifts above it like a bird. It's not loud, but it fills the air like smoke, and the Khan listens. He does not speak much, but when he does, it is soft, measured. The others lean in. He asks about your family, about your herds, about the dream you had 2 nights ago. Nothing is rushed. There is no need to impress. This is not the Europe of kings with long tables and courses that last until dawn. Here, feasting is both survival and ceremony. Outside, the steppe stretches in every direction, silent, endless. But inside, the world is full of warmth, of meat and milk, of stories and flame. Somewhere near the Khan's feet, a small child dozes, head resting on a dog's side. A guard at the flap of the yurt hums along with the singer. The fire pops once, gently, and the shadows dance on the walls like old spirits. In time, the food is cleared. The music slows, and Genghis Khan rises. He does not shout, he only nods, and everyone stands in respect. No crown, no throne, but power, in silence. The Khan retires to a smaller tent. The guests finish their drinks, and the fire burns low. You lie back, your belly full, your limbs soft, and overhead, through the gap in the yurt's roof. You see the stars. They shine down on the camp like old friends. You hear a horse nicker in the distance. Someone stirs the coals. And then stillness. You are in the centre of the world, and all is quiet.